Good afternoon. I would like to introduce you to our host, Dr. KK Owen.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to be focused today on a very special topic, and it happens to be one of my favorite topics, harvesting and celebrating wins. We've been through a lot as leaders in the last few weeks. Our world has turned upside down. We used to meet like this, and now we meet like this. So things are changing for us every single day. It's very easy to let something like celebrating wins, harvesting wins, paying attention to progress fall off of our plate. So what we're going to be working on today is circling back to this very important idea of how do we harvest and celebrate the wins during this unusual time that we're living in. So these are the 4 things we're going to be looking at. First, we're going to talk about why. Why do we harvest and celebrate wins in the first place? Then we'll turn our attention to 2 big ideas, the progress principle and the power of small wins, and how both of those ideas can help us as we harvest and celebrate wins during this time. Then we'll talk about how we as leaders can help our teams focus on that which we can do as opposed to that which we have no control over. And how do we focus on what we are doing to make progress during this time? And then finally, we will ask you to submit your questions and we'll do our best to answer those. So let's talk about the why of wins. First, reward and recognition. We know as leaders that this is a critical part of our work. We also know that it's much easier to do this in a physical environment and in real time. We've all done shout outs during meetings, drive-bys where we walk into someone's office or into their classroom and tell them what they're doing that's really helping our organization. That's very hard to do when we're not with each other in a physical environment. So we have to think differently about how we reward and recognize. Secondly, what right looks like. This is that idea of being able to point out when someone is doing something very well. It might be a behavior that aligns to our values. It might be living out one of our standards of practice or standards of excellence. It's that idea of being who we say we are to those we serve. And again, this isn't really observable in a virtual environment. We can't point out in real time what right looks like. Third, the emotional bank account. We all know what research tells us about that. It's up to us as leaders to continually make deposits in the emotional bank accounts of those we lead, because sometimes we'll have to make a withdrawal. In this world we're living in currently, we don't have those visual cues that help us know when to make a deposit. So we have to be more intentional as we're working remotely. And last, we are humans. And this idea of human reinforcement is something that our team members really need from us right now. Humans crave recognition. They crave interaction. Working remotely can create a sense of separation, anxiety. Most importantly, it's liable to create a loss of confidence in one's ability to make progress in their work. So we as leaders need to be paying attention to this reinforcement that the humans that we lead really need. So that brings us to our first poll. How would you rate your team's ability to harvest and celebrate wins during this time of virtual working? So if we'll all go to that poll in the Slido, and start our answers, we should be able to see what we're all thinking about this particular question. I'm watching it on my phone. I hope you're watching it on your phone. And it's looking like you guys are doing pretty well with this idea of harvesting and celebrating wins. What I see is about 56% are saying above average, 28 average, 8 excellent, below average is 8, and unsatisfactory is 0. Nice to hear that you're able to focus on this idea even in this unusual time that we're living in. So let's see how we can take ourselves to the next level. Let's begin to look at some of these ideas. This is the progress principle. It's based on research that says the more frequently people can experience a sense of progress in the work that they're doing, the more likely they are to be very productive in the long run. People seem to be most satisfied, or at least their surveys tell us so, with their job, and therefore more motivated when the job gives them the opportunity to experience achievement. That's different than completing tasks. It's experiencing achievement, that idea of meaningful work. Interestingly enough, only about 5% of leaders rank progress as the primary motivator for employees. So it's kind of that hidden motivator for our employees. If they're making progress and they're able to recognize that, they are more productive. So here's an idea for a tactic. An employee check-in as opposed to an employee check-up. I think sometimes today, in this remote world we're living in, we think about checking up on our employees. Let's twist that around and think about checking in. As we teach, when we coach, we praise in public and we coach in private. So leaders need to be assuming this stance of positive intent and behaving in a non-judgmental way. Not only is that staying tuned in to what people are accomplishing each day and noticing progress, but it's also offering up a space for people to talk about their actions, even their setbacks. Leaders who are able to do this and create this space often notice that employees will come to them with a small setback. This creates a kind of no surprises environment where leaders are allowed the opportunity to tackle small issues before they become big issues. And here's an example of that. Secondly, staying in leader stance. And right now that means being very visible and very transparent. Your job currently as a leader is to be the resource, not the micromanager. So you're removing the obstacles. You're providing the materials that people need to do their work. Most importantly, you're the emotional support. Here's an example of that. What is keeping you from doing your best work, and how can I help? Notice the positive intent and the non-judgment, even in that example. Thirdly, here's what we know and are learning more and more every day. Everyone watches what the leader's doing, especially right now. If you spend time on Facebook or Twitter, there's a lot out there about what leaders are doing and about what leaders are not doing in this current environment. So we have to lead by modeling. And the reason for that is that's what we expect them to be doing. We expect no panic, no pointing fingers from them. We as leaders have to behave the same way. And we can do that by responding to the crisis in the way that we expect others to respond, staying focused on issues and not pointing fingers. Here's an example of that. Notice the calmness in this example. Now we've faced challenges before. Let's think back. What worked then? So if we take how we behave as leaders and move that into talking about the power of celebrating our progress, leaders have to do some very specific things. Understanding the definition of a win. There is power in celebrating small wins. Employees report in surveys that if they have a good day at work, they will say they made progress. And they will very often note, I had small wins today. And they can name what those are. When we as leaders can grab those, harvest them, and celebrate them by pointing them out, this tees up the employees to have an even more productive day the next day at work. So being clear about connecting actions to progress and knowing the difference between completing tasks and moving toward achievement of goals. Secondly, that same survey tells us that employees report that they had a bad day at work. It's normally around something that feels like a setback to them. So for us as leaders, we need to be very aware of the negative impact that a setback can bring. In a remote environment, remember, employees are losing confidence. They're questioning themselves. So as leaders, we have to truly be aware and be intentional about how we balance pointing out setbacks and celebrating small wins. Because just like the good day sets people up for productivity the next day, the bad day feeling for employees leads them to be unproductive the next day. We also have to be intentional about how we celebrate, and it has to be done in a way that makes sense to our team. The tone of a celebration is up to us as leaders. So we've got to say thank you so that team members can see their contribution, connect it to the progress the team is making, and we've got to celebrate in a way that the team prefers. So ask them. Here's a tool you might consider using as you think about this idea of the power of celebrating progress. At the end of each day, do this little daily check. Ask yourself, what are one or two things that happened today that are small wins, maybe even breakthroughs that I can point out, harvest, and celebrate? And what are setbacks? What are one or two things that happened today that might indicate a setback or even a looming crisis? Then as you think about those, you can set yourself up for success as a leader the following day by knowing how you're going to balance celebrating small wins and pointing out setbacks. So this brings us to our second poll, which is actually a self-assessment. How often do you balance celebrating small wins and pointing out setbacks? So that poll should be coming up on your Slido. And as you take that poll and find your answer, you can start to see how people are feeling about this self-assessment and where you fall in comparison to other leaders who are joining us today. It looks like most of us are in the usually category. We've got a few brave souls who called themselves out as always. And a few people, interestingly enough, about the same amount who are seldom or rarely. Thanks for thinking about this, because it's important. The balance is up to us, and in this remote work environment that we're living in, really, really important to balance ourselves. So whatever category you placed yourself in, think about what the next category looks like for you. And let's keep going. This is probably my favorite part. When you think about your stance as a leader, the power of celebrating small wins, the next thing to ask yourself and to think about on your leadership journey is, how do I push my team toward progress? The progress principle teaches us that our employees need that connection, the meaningful connection to true progress, to have a good day and to be productive. So what do we do as leaders to make sure that that happens for them? First of all, it's up to us to ask the right questions. This helps our team focus on what are the right next steps. I love this first question. What do we control in the current crisis? And what do we not control? Just employees being able to make those two lists. What's within our control and what's not. It's very easy to get paralyzed by what we can't control. So help people see the difference. And then secondly, ask them some questions. What did we do last week that helped us to make progress on what we can control so that they can see it? Next, you might ask, what would make this week a little bit better than last week? This allows the team to see and hear and think together about this idea of progress. And then finally, as we think forward and look forward to the time when coronavirus is over, what opportunities do we see and what are we learning about our organization and our team? There will be a time after the crisis, and we have the great opportunity to move some of these learnings into the way that we will work together after the crisis. So we have to ask the right questions. We can't let people flounder on those rocks of what they can't control. So then we have to act. As leaders, we ask the questions, we hear what people are saying, and then we have to take action. We need to remind them and recognize them for really important skills right now, such as being adaptable, flexible, willing to do what it takes. And then we have to be the leader that helps steer our team toward the best next step for those things that are within our control and away from those dangerous rocks. We can't let them waste their efforts and spin on what we can't control. So using very intentional language as we work with our teams, and we as leaders taking action to steer toward the best next steps. That's really important to us. My favorite tactic is handwritten thank you notes sent to our team members, recognizing small wins and progress. I think this is maybe the best action by a leader that you can take right now. Luckily for us, with so many things shut down, the mail is still running. You can still send mail. So this is a great idea right now and a great way to help your team members connect themselves and the small wins to meaningful progress. Big wins are fabulous and we love to celebrate them, and they're easy to celebrate, but they are rare. In this age of working in a remote environment, what we need to be doing is celebrating those small wins, because small wins added to small wins added to small wins equals good execution. We have more influence than we think over our employee motivation. The progress principle teaches us that positive feedback loop where a worker can connect their inner work life to true progress, if we can do that for them, that's a great leader habit to have. We also need to use great caution and not let people get hung up in completing tasks, but rather help them focus on making a difference and making small progress. We might not be curing cancer. We might not be alleviating world poverty. But what we can do is determine what has meaning to our organization and what has meaning to our employees and those we lead and serve. And then we make it clear to them about how their efforts are contributing. Leaders are the ones who can do that. So what we'd like to do now is let you share your ideas. How do you celebrate wins in a way that pushes the team you lead forward to progress? So if you'll move over to the ideas section, you can begin to share your ideas about how you do this, and you can also like other participants' ideas.
We've already got some coming in, KK, so I pulled it up.
Wonderful. Wall of wins. That's a great idea. Electronic shout outs. That's also a good idea. Consistent meetings. One of the best things you can do is have consistent meetings with your teams and use your cameras. People need to see each other. Our team does this every single day, and I am one of the people on our team that can't wait for that daily time when we get to see each other on the screen. It's a wonderful idea. I love that question. Do you need anything to help you move forward? That's that leadership responsiveness, being the resource, but not the micromanager, and also pushing forward to the current work. Nice ideas. Sharing on social media and tagging people. Good. Sharing a win, asking people in advance, be willing to share a win. Our team does that as well. Awesome. I see one of my favorite words there, being intentional. Be very intentional. Remember the progress principle. These are awesome ideas. Just to let you know, we will collect all of these and you will receive these as the follow-up to this presentation today. And along with the slide deck, you'll also see all of the materials that we've shared with you today. Thank you for sharing your ideas. These are great ideas. And what we'd like to do now is to turn our attention to some questions and answers. It looks like, Mandy, we've also got some people in the chat that are also sharing that way. So that'll be great. We'll capture those as well. So as the questions start to come in, we will do our best to answer those. Also know that we will collect all of the questions that come in today and send those out to you as well. So here's a question. What can I do as a leader if some of the recognition that people want to share is not aligned to our organizational goals? That is a great question. One thing that may help is to tee the question up in a very specific way. Ask people specifically. An example might be, tomorrow, we'd like to ask some people to share recognition around our value of collaboration. So think about the examples that you've seen during the past 2 days around our value of collaboration. You might even remind people. Remember, the way that we have defined collaboration is being open to other ideas, being willing to share. Whatever you have set up as a definition for that value, and ask people to speak specifically to that. One day it might be innovation, one day it might be respect. So whatever that is, kind of ask people to tee up the recognition. Here's another question. Sometimes I feel like I'm always recognizing the same people. Any ideas for ensuring that I don't just repeat the same folks? Another great question. Keep a checklist. As a leader, this will be really easy to do in a remote work environment. Just have your notebook there. When you recognize somebody during a virtual meeting, make a little note. Remember who your team members are that you haven't recognized in a while. Even if you can't think of something, you might ask others to share. You might have an around the room, draw a name, and give a shout out about a team member. Let people recognize each other. But keeping a checklist, I think, is the best way, and allowing other people to share in the reward and recognition. Another question is, how small or large should a win be? I would say doesn't matter. Some of the tiniest wins are most meaningful to some employees, and we don't have a way to know that. So let's just share as many as we can. And we remember from the research around the progress principle that people report small wins that they accomplish each day are the way they stay connected to productive work. I love this idea. Have peers recognize each other. That's a great way to bring it to different people. And it also allows each of us to see the rest of our team in a different light. So that's a wonderful, wonderful idea. Any other questions that we see coming in there? Okay, in the few minutes that we have left together, I just want to bring you back to this idea that leadership is a choice. We've chosen to lead. Maybe we didn't choose to lead in this time, in this current crisis, but that's where we find ourselves. So my goal for today was for you to be able to walk away with one or two ideas. Maybe the idea of the progress principle stuck with you. Maybe the idea of an employee or a team check-in as opposed to a check-up resonated with you. Maybe you'll want to try using this idea of a daily progress versus setback checklist and making an intentional plan about how you'll balance the next day. So I hope you are coming away with one or two ideas that are helping you to sharpen your saw as a leader as you lead in this very unusual time. So I thank you for joining me today. I see one more question that's popped up here. Can you recognize too much? Nope, it's kind of like communication. There's no such thing as over communication. There's no such thing as over recognition. So get out there, harvest those wins, and celebrate them. Thank you so much for joining today.